It's great to be here, guys. Thanks for connecting. I'm excited to do this webinar. For everyone who doesn't know me from my network, I just want to share with you guys, I'm really excited to be here with you. What you're going to learn today will be really transformative for your work. Understanding in the coaching world how intimacy and business are related and connected are really important. You guys are going to have a lot of breakthroughs by the end of this. You're going to walk away from this. You're going to have a lot of realizations. So as you're here in this space with me for about an hour or so, I just want to encourage you guys to pay attention, but to also recognize that this is going to shift some things for you. Your experience of life is going to change after this next 60 minutes. You're going to look at your relationship to yourself and all your past relationships in ways that you never have looked at. I'm going to put a new lens over the way that you see all of your relationships, not just romantic, not just friendship, but also business related too. If you're in the coaching world, knowing intimacy and how to regulate intimacy is an incredibly valuable skill. All businesses come down to two things: managing relationships and managing tasks. And excuse me, and finding the middle ground between those two. When you can find the middle ground between those two, you'll see that your business will take off, because you'll know how to be intimate and focused and present and aware of social settle cues when you need to be, but you'll also still be able to get all the tasks that you need to do as well. It's really a middle ground between the two. So here we go, intimacy and business. No one talks about this. A lot of individuals do not talk about intimacy. They think intimacy is something that's just romantic, or that you do with your spouse or your loved one. But intimacy is a way of being, it's a way of life, and it's a way of living. So how does intimacy carry over to business, especially in the coaching world? So let's really get into intimacy here. Intimacy is exposing yourself to a stranger, being genuine and transparent about every aspect of yourself: hopes, dreams, fears, and desires, but also in your close relationships. We don't want to open up just to random strangers. Not everyone's worthy of you and who you really ultimately are. That's up for you to decide. But ultimately, it's putting yourself out there, being vulnerable. That's what intimacy is. Intimacy can only be created when we're vulnerable, when we're truly open. Now, I talk with so many individuals, and I've been one of them in my own life, when I ask them, how are you, or how are you with relationships? And they say, oh yeah, I can be intimate, or yeah, intimacy doesn't scare me, or I have no problem with this. So here's some signs that you actually might be afraid of true intimacy in a relationship or in life. Signs, here we go. Number one, do you dismiss someone right away who you don't vibe with? I hear this all the time. Oh, I don't vibe with that person, or I don't. Well, everyone's different. Everyone's unique in their own way. But if we're afraid of intimacy, a lot of the times it can just show up as, I'm a really strong and independent person. And no, I just know what I like and I know what I don't like. But really, that's an intimacy issue. Intimacy doesn't necessarily mean having the same likes as someone, but it means accepting a person's likes, even if they're different than your own, and just accepting it. It doesn't mean letting go of your own values or letting go of what you prefer, but it doesn't mean judging other people's values either. So intimacy really is being able to be with anyone and just see whatever it is that they like or whatever it is that they prefer, whether you vibe with it or not, and not have any judgments around it. Number two, being nitpicky about small things. So if you're focused on really, really small things that drive you a little crazy, we all have this in relationships. I see it a lot, and I've seen it in my own life as well too. Then that nitpickiness is a fear of intimacy. Because a lot of the times what happens is there's these small things that drive us crazy, and we don't even think about all the good things that outweigh those small things. And finally, number three, if you're feeling intensely about people right away. So if you're very sensitive right off the bat, then you might have issues around intimacy. And the reason why this is because when we're really sensitive and if we feel really intensely about someone right off the bat and we would just want to go in and jump right in, it's because we're projecting what it is that we think who they really are onto that person and not actually seeing them for who they really are. So when we project our unconscious desires and we just get flow right into it really quickly, what's happening there is we're feeling incredibly intense about that person, and we feel incredibly intense about them because we're projecting onto them and we're not actually seeing them objectively and who they really are. Intimacy means authenticity and honesty, and we have to take our projections and our filters out of it when we want to be honest. Does that make sense? Good, great start. First off, I want to share this with you guys. Intimacy is really into me see. You see into me. I open up and I allow you to see me. Now, it's more than seeing. It's actually feeling. It's actually listening. It's actually seeing. And it's actually understanding. All four of them. You need to be felt. You need to be listened to. You need to be seen. And you need to be understood. All four of those are really key. Here's the great thing about this. When you're truly intimate with your relationships, whether it's in business, whether it's in friendship, you're going to be aware of those things that most individuals aren't aware of. You'll be aware of when someone's not going to follow through on a deal. You'll be aware of when someone's going to keep you on a call longer. You're going to be aware of when you're having a potential client call and they're just there to take because they're a tire kicker and they're not really invested in you. They just want to get the free goodies and then run just because that's how some people are, because they have a lack mindset. So feeling, listening, seeing, and understanding, that's what it's really about. That's what intimacy is. Imagine if every business conversation you had, you were intimate in this way. Imagine if every relationship you had, every person you knew what they were feeling in that moment. You were really listening to them. You were totally 100% present. You were seeing them and you were understanding them. That's incredible. That's an incredible power. In the East, in Africa, in other parts of the Orient, they call the ability to be intimate with another person, they call it white magic. Because white magic is a way of perceiving people to a degree that it feels like they're reading every part of you. But all that really is intimacy. That's all it comes down to. So the more intimate we can be with ourselves, the more intimate that we can be with other individuals and other people, the more powerful we are and the more influence and persuasion we'll have in the world, because we're really focused and present. Presence is power. Understanding is power. Listening, feeling, and seeing into an individual deeper than they can see into themselves is a power that all coaches, the best coaches, possess. But a lot of the times we don't use it. So we're going to get a lot into intimacy. We're going to get into the history of it. We're going to get into the effects of it. We're going to go into how it's still running your life, the lack of it, and how it's keeping you from being successful in your business and in your relationships. And number two, intimacy equals connection, and connection equals growth of business. Connecting with the world is what makes us feel alive. It's what makes us feel excited. When we're connecting with other individuals at that feeling level, at that listening level, at that seeing level, at that mental comprehension level, we're using everything. We're using our mind, understanding. We're using our sight, seeing. We're using our ears, listening. We're using our heart, feeling. And we're using our gut, our intuition, to tell us what we should do next. I can get on a call with a person now, and I can know if after I spend 2, 3, or 4 hours with them, whether it's going to be a good deal or not, or whether it's going to go through or not, or whether they're just going to take or not. And I trust that. And so intimacy, it's not only good for other people, and other people want to be connected to you more, it's good for you. When you're intimate with yourself, you can be intimate with others. And when you can be intimate with others, feeling, listening, seeing, and understanding, that's going to propel your business in ways that you couldn't have imagined before. As I learn to be more intimate, as I learn to be more open, vulnerable, really peering deep into people, my business only succeeds more. Because then I'm understanding people at all levels. I'm feeling people at all levels. Committed relationships make women almost twice as likely to climax. 75% have orgasms. What does this have to do with business? What does this have to do with relationship? Remember, when it comes to relationship and business, it's all about trust. They're the same. How we are in our relationships are how we are in our business a lot of the times. So if you're really connecting with your romantic partner and you're committed to them and they feel that sense of commitment, they feel that sense of trust, then they're going to enjoy the process of lovemaking way more. Business and love, like we have this statement, all's fair in love and war, right? And so love is always, love is really, that's a big part of us, and all wars are pretty much started over business. And it's actually the same energy center. So I'm going to share with you guys a blank slate here. I'm going to bring up a whiteboard. Hopefully I can bring up the whiteboard here. So if you see this, I'm going to just use this little white space for you guys because I can't bring up my whiteboard on this. But there's two energy centers. We all know about the root chakra and the heart center. Now the root chakra is safety and security. The heart center is trust. Safety and security and trust, the root chakra, security, is linked to money. And the heart is linked to passion and love. What happens when people have sex or they orgasm? They actually orgasm at the heart as well too. They feel more connected at the heart. So this is what this looks like. Now you'll never think this because this is a whole different way of thinking, but this is ultimately the energetics of intimacy and sales as well too. So I'm gonna draw this. So we have, let's say we have this is a little root chakra right here, okay? And then we have the energy go up, and then we have the heart chakra as well too. Now those two energy centers are linked. So between the root chakra and the heart chakra, we obviously have the Manipura chakra and the sacral as well. When you have trust in something, when you have a committed relationship, safety, security, money, it's all the same energy. It's root chakra level energy. And so that's going out into the world, right? To all your connections. If you're really, really aware, I'm really, really aware when I'm about to spend money or when I'm about to make money. I actually feel it in my root chakra. I feel it in that energy center, the safety and the security. Now that's also connected to the heart. For most individuals, if you're awake and if you're a coach, these two energy centers are probably connected. Your heart and your security are connected. You're living your passion and you're making a living doing your passion. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Is if another individual is connected in that same way, so that's their root chakra, that's trust, safety, security, and money. That's what the root chakra is all about. And then they're also connected up here to their heart. This is a really bad diagram, but I'm just using it for the space. The more trust, safety, and security that you generate, the more root chakra energy you're going to collect. Seth Godin, a really famous marketer, he talks about not even focusing on sales. All he focuses on scaling trust. He says, that's all I care about. I just want to scale trust. Now here's the genius about that. Sales and money is root chakra level energy, safety and security. Trust is root chakra level energy, safety and security. And so when you scale trust in your business, and you only can scale trust by being intimate, and by being intimate, you have to be honest. That doesn't mean being fake, social facade. It actually means being honest and real, which means stepping on people's toes at times. When you're real and honest, people trust you more. You are trustworthy. So there's a direct correlation between your level of trust and worthiness and the money that you make and building a successful long-term business. Now there's some people who come in the business and the market and they hit it and quit it, but they don't build longevous, sustainable businesses. But there's an energetic correlation. I'm just going to erase all this now. There's an energetic correlation between that root chakra, which represents safety, security, and trust, and sales. People only, most of the time in my experience, people only do business with people they trust. That has to be there. It's a prerequisite. Just has to be. Does this make sense, everyone? Is everyone tracking on this? Beautiful. So what does this have to do with committed relationships make women almost twice as likely to climax? 75% have orgasms. It's that root chakra level energy. And so when they feel that sense of trust, they can actually relax in their body and they can enjoy the process more. And it's the same with our business. When there's that trust there, people can relax more as well too. Is everyone tracking on this? Beautiful. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about the different types of intimacy. It's important to understand the different types of intimacy so we can see how intimacy affects our relationships. First, there's the emotional. The emotional side is just sharing feelings, both positive and negative. Second, there's social, which is sharing activities, what you like and what you don't like. Third, there's sexual, sharing fantasy and desire. We're not going to get into this too much because that's not really related too much to business unless you're a hired escort or something like this. And then finally, there's intellectual, which is sharing thoughts and ideas. So that's the fourth one, sharing thoughts and ideas. Those are all the different levels of intimacy. So we're going to switch away from business, go a little bit romantic side here. How many in your personal relationships do you have of these? Is your partner or the person that you're with or the people that you like to spend time with, can they stick with you intellectually? Are they open to hearing your fantasies sexually, and are you open to hearing theirs and their desires? Do you like to do the same social things together? Do you share a sense of feelings? Do you feel safe sharing your feelings, both positive and negative, and trust that they're going to be able to hear both positive and negative? Those are all the different types of intimacy we have. Now, how does this translate over to intimacy in the workplace? Well, you want to, in order to build intimacy in the workplace, there should be intellectual stimulation, social stimulation, and emotional stimulation. So you're sharing feelings, both positive and negative. You're sharing activities. Maybe, one of the clients that I work with out here, EPAC, it's a packaging company in Boulder. They take their guys out after they have a successful week to dinner, and they drink, and it's a fun little party, so they go hard. And then finally, intellectual, sharing thoughts and ideas, sharing strategies. So we want to share all these things in the workplace. Sexual, we don't really want to go there. Remember, that's a different industry. So why do we have intimacy issues? Because intimacy actually keeps us from being more successful. I was just talking with one woman. There's a message that I'm gonna bring up for you guys. I'm gonna share with you here. It was one woman, her name was Tracy, and it was amazing. I'll never forget this. What she shared with me that her boss didn't connect with her emotionally, and she was very crude and very harsh. And so what happened was she learned to not be emotionally invested in the work that she does for her boss. So she admitted to working less harder and being less emotionally involved because her boss was hard on the outside and was not responsive. So that's amazing to me. That's amazing to me. So our intimacy issues are affecting the workplace every single time, whether we realize it or not. If we're senior management, if we're directors and managers, or we're in those high-level CFO, CEO positions, then we need to get our intimacy issues straightened out. We need to be emotionally available for the people who we're connected with. We need to balance those relationships and tasks. Let's get into this a little bit deeper. So where do these intimacy issues come from? It comes from our parents. It comes from our upbringing. If parents don't respond to your emotions growing up, they say it's wrong and they turn against, they say that your emotions are wrong and they turn against you. What we learn as children is to disconnect from our emotions. We start to believe that what our emotions are telling us are wrong because we want to preserve the relationship. So what happens is we disown our emotions, we disown our personal truth. And so when we disown our personal truth and we disown our relations, our relationship to our emotions, so we can hold our parent up as this ideal parent, then that creates a lack of intimacy. We close ourselves off because we need to feel safe. What's the bigger issue here? The bigger issue is we want to love and hold our parents up high. And so if our parents are telling us that our emotions aren't valid and they disregard us, then we disconnect from our personal truth so we can hold our parents up. But what that does is that disconnects us from our emotions, and our emotions are our personal truth. Does this make sense, everyone? Are you guys tracking on this? So what happens is we put a wall up. We put a wall up, a facade, a mask, and we say and we think that our parents are our truth. And then that gets projected out there in the world, and we look for other people for authority and power. And those people take for government, from social systems. And instead of trusting ourselves and trusting our own intuition, we project it out there in the world because we've disowned our personal truth. So we're just seeing the projections of our lack of intimate relationships with our family. And that's just being projected constantly out there in the world. So your intimacy issues are directly related to your self-trust. Your intimacy issues are directly related to your self-trust in your business, your self-trust in your personal relationships, in every aspect of your life. Does this make sense? Is everyone tracking on this? Beautiful. 40 to 50% of married couples in the United States divorce. The divorce rate for subsequent marriages is even higher. Why does this happen? It happens because when we get into a relationship, if we're not connected with our emotions and our intuition in the beginning, then what happens is we form a connection based off of a false perception. And if you form a connection based off of a false perception or a mask that you're wearing, that you don't know that you've put on, but you put on when you were younger, then you're setting yourself up for heartbreak and failure. And that's exactly what people do. But here's the great thing about it. Heartbreak in divorce is really just you opening your heart back up because it was broken from when you were a child, before you even realized it. I see this all the time with my coaching clients, especially the successful ones who are killing it out there in the business world, but don't know shit about their intimate relationships. And I get it. I've been there. I've been that guy too. Still working on it a little bit. So 40 to 50% of married couples in the United States divorce. The divorce rate is rate for subsequent marriages is even higher. So it all stems back to our initial primary relationships, those first ones that imprinted upon us. And so if we didn't have our parents be emotionally responded to us, we learned to cut ourselves off from the truth of what we're really feeling. Emotions are nothing more than energy in motion. It's telling us what's actually going on in our environment. It's our greatest intuition. We need to trust our emotions. If we don't trust our emotions, what happens is we set ourselves up for shock and failure later on. And there's a link there between anxiety, self-trust, and intimacy, which I'm really excited to share with you guys. But that's going to come in the next slide. So let's get a little bit deeper into the intimacy issues here. Where does this connection between anxiety, lack of self-trust, and lack of intimacy all come together? It really comes from not having a secure attachment. When we come into the world, we need to have something that we bond to. That's our mothers. We need to have an attachment that allows us to feel secure. That allows us to develop self-trust. So if you grow up in an environment with your secure attachment, your mother, whoever's taking care of you, and it feels really safe and you can depend upon them and you can trust them, then what happens is you feel safe to go out there and explore the world. And so when you feel safe to explore the world, you're able to develop more self-trust. And then when things get too scary, what happens? You run back to your mother and you get comfort, and then you go out and explore again. That's when you have a healthy, secure attachment. When you don't have a healthy, secure attachment, what happens is the opposite. We can't develop self-trust. And so if we can't develop self-trust in ourselves, then we can't be trustworthy with other individuals. And intimacy is founded upon trust. Whenever we're intimate with another person, it's because we trust ourselves on a deeper level. Because if we trust ourselves, our judgment, our discernment, then we know who to let in and who not to, who's safe and who isn't. So anxiety is nothing more than an emotion that's telling you that there's no trust within yourself or within another individual person. So if someone makes you feel anxious, they might be triggering you. It could be something within you. They are triggering you. Or they're really not a trustworthy person, so you should trust your gut feeling around that. This is linked to your primary caregiver. If you had a primary caregiver who wasn't trustworthy, then you couldn't develop that self-trust in yourself. And so you lost your authentic connection to who you really are, your own power, your own personal truth. And so when you lose that authentic connection, what happens when you lose that authentic connection, what happens is you lose sight of your intuition. And you're not sure what's right or what's wrong, what you should let in, what's safe, what isn't safe. So the anxiety is nothing more than a signal that you need to develop more emotional connection with yourself. And the deeper you get into your own emotional connection, the deeper you get into your own intimacy, the more you can be intimate with another person. So the link between trust and intimacy, I hope you guys are really seeing that. That's really important here. The more intimate you can be, the more trust you have. And the trust stems all the way back to your primary caregiver. If you had a primary caregiver who was trustworthy, who you felt was there for you and supportive at any time that you needed, then that anxiety doesn't come up. Anxiety is a product of not feeling like you're secure. And if you're not feeling secure, it's because no one ever was there for you to hold space for you to grow and explore the world in bigger ways. What happens? What happens when we're younger and we don't have a trustful primary caregiver? We don't trust them because they're not trustworthy. They're not worthy of our trust. Well, we shove our feelings down. We shove our feelings down to protect the relationship. A child doesn't have the emotional intelligence. Yes, they're incredibly intelligent, but they don't have the emotional intelligence. So what happens is the mind makes up an automatic story. So if you have these feelings, of no trust because your primary caregiver isn't trustworthy, then what happens is you as a child, because you don't have that emotional intelligence developed, you look at your primary caregiver and you say, okay, well, my primary caregiver, I can't trust them, but they're older than me and they're my parents, so they must know better than me. So I guess I must not be trustworthy. And so we turn it on ourselves. And this is something that the mind does automatically. The mind is always trying to create up stories and narratives. And the reason why it creates stories and narratives is because that's what it does. It's the purpose. The mind is a tool to help you navigate your external environment. But when things go wrong in that early childhood development and you shut your feelings down because you have to survive, that's the only way that you can actually live. If you were to feel those feelings of your parent not being actually trustworthy, then that's too overwhelming at that young age. So it's a survival mechanism. Parent is God to the child because they brought you into this world and they're the first person that you have an experience with. The first thing that we have an experience of, we always tend to glamorize that thing. So what happens? We experience feelings of shame. And we experience feelings of shame because we tell ourselves we must be wrong. We tell ourselves we must be wrong because clearly the parent or our primary caregiver can't be wrong. They've been further along, they birthed us into the world. So we put ourselves down. So anytime that you feel shame, know that you're giving your power away to something else outside of you, but then two, you're also trying to cover up feelings of anxiety or a lack of self-trust. So I'm just going to go and review here so we get this whole connection. Anxiety comes from not having a secure attachment growing up. And because of that anxiety, we can't trust ourselves. And because we can't trust ourselves, that anxiety, because there's no trust, that creates a feeling of shame. And that feeling of shame stems from us having to tell ourselves that we are not trustworthy. And we tell ourselves that we are not trustworthy because we have a parent who brought us into this world. A child doesn't have that emotional intelligence to recognize that I'm okay, but my parent isn't okay. So if you come into the world and your parent's an alcoholic and they're going crazy all the time and they have no emotional regulation, but you as this child has perfect emotional regulation because you come in a natural equilibrious state, then what happens is the child automatically takes on that unconscious projection because it doesn't know any other way. It doesn't have that emotional intelligence. So where does intimacy come in on this? If you don't trust yourself, then you can't trust other people. And if you can't trust other people, then you cannot let anyone in. And if you can't let anyone in, then that creates feelings of loneliness and isolation. So there's this whole emotional track, and I'm going to share this whole emotional track in summary before the end of this presentation. Is this making sense? Are you guys tracking on this? Beautiful. So why we don't do it. Number one, we think people will take advantage of us if we take our walls down. We feel if we're vulnerable, then we're exposed. And if we're exposed, then people can take advantage of us. And if people take advantage of us, then they can hurt us or kill us. Number two, it doesn't feel safe. And frankly, it isn't safe. If you never had the opportunity to develop that level of self-trust, then it's not safe. Number three, we worry that they won't accept us, thereby increasing our shame, or worse, use it against us, thereby increasing our defensiveness. So what's that about? If they don't accept us, rejection, we fear of rejection, then our shame will be increased. And if our shame is increased, then we don't feel good about ourselves and we go into hiding. Does that make sense? So those are the reasons why we're not intimate. It doesn't feel safe, and it doesn't feel safe because we haven't learned to use our own compass of who's trustworthy to let in and who isn't. And we're afraid that people will take advantage of us if we put our walls down. And if we do show who we really are, then we worry that we won't be accepted and we'll be rejected. And if we put our walls down, then we show our true selves and then we're rejected, our shame increases. Does that all make sense? We're going to get deeper into this as we continue to go here, guys. So what are the effects of a lack of intimacy? I love this picture here. If you look at this picture, it's a real simple picture. You have one person hiding behind a mask, speaking through that mask, and another person shouting. And so this is what most of us do. We hide behind emotional masks because that was exactly what we had to do growing up. And we do this unconsciously. We don't know we're still doing it. There's times where I'm still doing it, and then I see it, I'm like, oh, there's a mask. I got to take that thing off and be real. But it makes us feel safe. So we hide behind the mask, we put the walls up because it makes us feel safe. But here's the thing, we're betraying ourselves on the inside. And we're betraying ourselves, and that leads to feelings of lack of self-worth, feelings of rejection that are all unconscious that we might not even know that are there. I've coached very successful people, And when we come up on this, they're like, oh my God, I never knew this was there. I always thought of myself as a really confident person who could do anything out there in the world. There's a difference between what you think and then actually what's really going on under the surface. Number one, what are the effects of lack of intimacy in early childhood? We disconnect from our feelings and our thoughts and body, and disconnect from desire. Heart is broken. A majority of individuals who grew up in homes where they had parents who weren't necessarily emotionally supportive or direct with their needs, they're disconnected from their true desires. They're disconnected from their true feelings and their thoughts and their body. And so what happens is they wear this mask and they go out there, they wear that mask in society, but ultimately there's feelings of betrayal because they've betrayed themselves, because they had to. We've all done this to some level. Not everyone, but a majority of people. I would say with 85% of the people that I connect with and go deep, there's these issues here. And I've had to come up with them in my own life. And some coaches, they're still dealing with them. I've coached plenty of coaches who've killed it in their coaching business, but still have this shit to work through. So we disconnect from our feelings and thoughts and body and disconnect from desire. Our heart is broken from the start. A lot of individuals don't even realize how heartbroken they really are. And then they experience heartbreak in a relationship when really that heartbreak in the relationship is actually you opening back up to your natural self, your natural state, learning to listen to your emotions, learning to feel again. Number two, we create a deep pain for never being understood or never being wanted. There's a deep pain inside of a lot of individuals because they've never shown their true selves. When you don't show your true self and you put up a mask, it's great because it allows you to navigate the world and you can feel safe as you navigate the world. However, that being said, the bad part about that, the bad part about that is you carry feelings of betrayal and you carry feelings where you've never actually truly connected authentically with a lot of individuals. You never connected with them authentically because you connected with at the mask level. And that hurts. That hurts whether we realize it or not. And if it's a pain that I see a lot of individuals and myself at times in my own life carried, then it's just normal and average until it leaves. Number three, avoidance of vulnerability because we interpret it as being unsafe because it was when we were growing up. We avoid vulnerability because we interpret it as being unsafe because it was when we were growing up. If you were vulnerable and you were open and you were honest, then what would have happened most likely is your parent would have shut you down or got mad at you or abused you. I know I was just talking with one of my clients the other day, successful entrepreneur, has 25 employees in his company, multimillionaire. He's done a lot of great work within the electrical industry. And we are going into this space. And he shared with me, he said, Jared, I never realized that I had a lack of intimacy. I never realized I had these issues. I just never knew it was there. And that's what happens is we try to build all these things out there in the world to make us feel safe on the inside. But eventually you come back into those true feelings and those true feelings come to the surface and everything shifts. So an avoidance of vulnerability because we interpret it as being unsafe. Because if you were vulnerable when you were younger, then it would have been rejection by your parents. And then rejection, the second emotion that piles on top of that is shame. Oh, I'm being honest and you're rejecting me? Oh, now I'm ashamed. And we close down. And then we put out a mask that matches to the perception of our spouses or our close family. Is this making sense? Is everyone tracking on this? Beautiful. So, what are more of the effects? You ignore subtle social cues because you were never heard or seen in the first place. So why hear or see others? Now, this isn't for everyone, but I've met a lot of people, and most people are good at reading others. However, if you're not good at reading another individual, it's because you ignore subtle social cues because you were never heard or seen in the first place. So why hear or see others? Everything's a mirror, so if we can't read other individuals It's because we feel like no one's ever reading us. And that's what intimacy is. It's reading. It's truly seeing another person. Psychics will call it a psychic reading, but that's our natural state. That's our natural state, to understand what other people are thinking, to understand what other people are feeling, to understand what other individuals are seeing and about the interaction with us. We learn that our needs are not important, so we try to manipulate to get our needs met, which just causes more mental stress and anxiety. You can be successful in the world without having stress. But a lot of the reasons why people have stress is because they're trying to manipulate others. And so when you're trying to manipulate others because you think you have to go about these roundabout ways to get what it is that you want, what happens is that you have to scheme. And so when you scheme up in your mind, you think, oh, can I do this? Should I go at it this way? Should I go at it this way? Instead of being straight with others, then it is stressful because you have so many more thoughts. But when you speak straight and you're just forward, there's no issues. There's no issues at all. So understanding intimacy and how it relates to business is absolutely key. Absolutely key. When you can read people, feel people, understand people, see people, you can see everything coming from a mile away. Everything. I'll give you a perfect example of this. I was making a big investment in my next coach. It was a $75,000 investment. So I was looking out to new coaches, interviewing them. And one of the coaches that I met with, it didn't feel right. And so it didn't feel right. I sat with it a little bit, and I actually had a dream where there was like cop sirens. Long story short, the way that I interpreted my dream was that she wasn't trustworthy and that she just took the money and ran, and there was no trust. And that was not okay for me. So I trusted that, and I didn't do it. And sure enough, I found out months later that she's being sued and that people are trying to find her. And so your feelings, if you have intimacy issues, chances are you're disconnected from your feelings, and you'll have more bad business deals because of it. Is this making sense? Awesome. So ultimately, what does this look like? What does this really look like from the top down? So first, we have no self-trust. And we've already talked about where that self-trust develops or doesn't develop from. It's from not having that primary caregiver, that secure attachment or that secure relationship where we feel like we can go explore the world, get a little fucked up by it, and then come back and feel safe when we need to feel safe. So what that does is that creates anxiety because we don't have a secure attachment. So this innate anxiety is always a part of us. Now, with that innate anxiety, we also feel a sense of inauthenticity, because inauthenticity stems from putting out a wall or putting out a mask. We talked about that mask earlier. When you put out a mask, you feel safer. You feel safer because you're not putting your real self out there. So if you're not putting your real self out there, then what's the big deal? You don't have any really real skin in the game, so you can't get hurt. That's at least what we think and feel. So the anxiety stems from inauthenticity. Oh, I wonder if I'm going to be found out. That's another component of anxiety. I need to be alone because that's when I can be myself. So anyone who says that they like to spend a lot of time alone, which there's nothing wrong with that. I like to spend a lot of time alone, but we also want to ask ourselves, are we really being authentic and real out there in the world? Number 3, feeling alone. So because we're being inauthentic and everyone is getting to know this mask, then what happens naturally is we feel very alone and isolated in the world. So if people only know your mask and not the deeper, real, authentic parts of you, that's going to be a really lonely place. Then one more step, what happens because we're not being real, because we're not being authentic, we start to feel shame. I'm not defective or I'm not good enough. And because we feel that shame, then that translates to the next emotion, which is a lack of worthiness. I'm not worthy of true love or acceptance. So this is the vicious emotional cycle that can start and that can permeate all of our relationships. So let's talk about Dr. Sternberg's theory of love. This is really crucial to understand. His theory changed psychology. He came out with this theory in 1982, and it's still loved by many today and criticized by others within the field of psychology. So Dr. Sternberg talks about 6 different types of love, and they all involve these 3 things: intimacy, commitment, and passion. Ideally, we want to have all 3. But what happens a lot of the times in life is we only have one or the other, or different combinations or variations of these 3. So let's actually walk down these different combinations and these variations. Let's say that you have an intimate relationship, right? There's intimacy. So we're defining intimacy here as vulnerability, openness. So you're being visible, you're being seen by the world. Vulnerability and openness. Number 2 would be commitment, and we're defining commitment as the ability to say we're going to be together for long term. And then 3, there's passion, what you're actually feeling at the heart. If you just have intimacy that's present in a relationship, but there's no commitment or passion, then that's what a friendship is. A deep friendship is just pure intimacy, but there's not necessarily commitment or passion there. Let's just talk about if you had passion. Let's say you just had passion and that was it. If it was just passion and your heart was on fire, then what's there is nothing more than just a heart of it's a fire. That's it. There's no substance to it. There's no commitment there. There's really no intimacy. It's purely carnal desire that's taken you over. This is you see this in relationships in Hollywood, where people get married for 60 days and then they break up after that. It's just because in that moment their passion and their heart drove them, and that was it. Then there's just commitment. This is an empty marriage where people don't have intimacy, there's no passion, but for the sake of the contract, or like Blink-182's famous 1990s hit, stay together for the kids, that's just what commitment is. You can have commitment, but if there's no intimacy and there's no passion, then what's the purpose and what's the point? And then finally, we have 2 of these. So what does intimacy and passion look like? Intimacy and passion looks like a relationship that's heading in the right direction. That type of relationship, people are open, they're feeling love for each other, but they might not necessarily be committed to one another. This is what I hear from individuals whenever I do coaching around this area. I'll hear it as my life partner. So we have intimacy and we have passion, but we're not necessarily committed to each other, because a commitment to us is us actually feeling like we're constricted. So intimacy and passion is a good relationship. It's a healthy relationship. You're open, you're vulnerable, you have a lot of passion. There's just not the commitment piece, so you can call it off at any time. Then there's intimacy and commitment. So what is intimacy and commitment? Intimacy and commitment is ultimately a business relationship. You're open, you're developing trust, a healthy business relationship. You're open, you're developing trust, and you're committed. You're committed to that person and to be there for them, and they're committed to you, and vice versa, and to an exchange of services, and you're open and transparent. There might be some passion in there, but ultimately that's the real relationship, is when we have all 3. When we have intimacy, we're open, we're vulnerable, and in that vulnerability, we still feel safe with that other person, because that other person's vulnerable as well too. We're passionate, so we're really on fire, we're open, our heart's involved, and we're committed. This is what the most healthiest relationships come down to, where there's commitment, where there's passion, and where there's intimacy. You're open and you're vulnerable, your heart's on fire, and you're committed longevitously to stay with that individual and that person.